biggest challenge I had in making my first playground map in Grounded was getting bugs to spawn the way I wanted them to. Let me start by showing you the problem, then I'll show you 3 ways to solve it. So here I am in a blank grass box map, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the play mode. So this is an anthill, and what I've done is I've placed 15 red ants inside this hill. I do have red ant armor on, so they should ignore me, but you'll see in just a second that they're going to start coming out of the hill. So of course, this is the natural behavior you want to see in the game. The ants will be coming out of the hill, and that's perfectly fine. The problem is if you just place the ants in the hill, and I'll go down there and show you what I'm talking about, what will end up happening is all the ants will come out. So if I just give it a few seconds, more and more of them are going to pour out. I'm going to slowly walk in here, and what you're going to notice is that there's going to be basically giant rooms that are empty that have no ants inside of them, and it's because the natural tendency of the ants is to leave the hill they're in. I've tested this with red ants, I tested it with black ants, I also tested it with larvae. So if I go down here and take a look, we'll probably end up running into this room being completely empty. I did place, I think, 3 or 4 ants down in here. And you'll notice this giant room down here is now completely empty. If I go back up, now we're going to check out this room over here. This is going to be the second room. You're going to notice these ants did just start coming out, which is fine. However, I did walk into the hill immediately after starting it up. So if I was across the map, more likely than not, by the time I got over here, most of the ants would have completely left the hill. Maybe a couple of them would have been wandering around. And you'll notice I go back here into this room, and this room's pretty big. There's none inside of here right now. So that's the main problem. And if I go into design mode, I'll show you kind of how I laid them out. So let me get my torch out here. So I placed an ant here, and then I scattered another, I put another one over here. So there was 2 in this little tunnel back here. Out in the main area here is where I placed most of them. I think there's like 6 or something like that out here, or something like that. So I placed those out here. Back here in this room, I placed a couple more. And then over here in this other room over here that I just showed a second ago, I think there's a couple down this tunnel. And like I said, this is the natural behavior. So this isn't a big deal if you don't mind all the ants coming out. However, I'm sure if you play the game, you'll see here, this is the last of this. So if you play the game, you'll know if you go inside of an anthill, typically what you'll find is some of the ants are coming and going, but there's also going to be ants that are staying inside of it. Now, maybe you just have to place enough of them and that'll happen, but more likely than not, I believe the way it works is developers have coded them so that a certain amount of them will at least stay inside the hill. So what I want to do is I want to show you basically 3 different ways you can prevent this from happening, basically having the entire tunnel being empty. The reason you might want to do this is just an example of an anthill. If you played my map, you'll know that the map that I created has, I think it's like 3 or 4 different areas that you can go inside of. And what I did in those was I basically placed down enemies the way I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you the different ways I placed them. And the way that I did it was there will be natural movement, but I also had it where they'll basically be spawning. So you should always be running into enemies as you're going through it, because it will be quite boring if you're going through like a underground tunnel or a dungeon or whatever like that, and there's no enemies inside of it. Okay, so here's an identical hill. Basically, I created a different map. So this is a different map, but I have the same setup going. So if I open up and turn it on play mode, you'll notice that the ants will slowly start coming out of the hill like they did last time. So this time it took quite a bit longer for them to come out. But what I did in here was instead of just scattering them around and just leaving them there, I placed in some spawners, and I'm going to show you 3 different ways that I have been using to spawn them in. There's probably other ways you can do it. There's probably many other ways, but these are the ways I'm doing it. So what I did here was I have the same 3 tunnels, except this one doesn't have a door. No, these other 2 have doors. I'm going to show you 3 methods. So when I come down here, before when I came down here, there was no ants, right? They had all left. Now you're going to notice there's an ant, and there's another ant. So there's 3 ants down here, even though as I just walked into the tunnel. Now we go back up here and check out the other 2 doors, and we're going to see the same thing. There's going to be ants inside of these rooms, obviously because there's doors blocking them. The one thing I will say is you can put doors up, but what will end up happening is, like if I put a door at the front of the entrance and I have like 50 ants in here, and even if I go to that door pretty quickly, most of the ants will end up being piled up against it. That was the first time I discovered this, was when I had the black ant hill that I created. All the ants in the front room were basically, I was like 20 of them stuck against the door. I couldn't even get inside of it. So what I have in here is I'm going to have this. I'm going to open this up, and you're going to notice behind this dirt mound, there is an ant there, and there should be a couple more. So there's a couple ants over there. And then over here, I used, instead of just using the plain door, I used a lever. So this door should be locked if I did it correctly. So the door is locked. However, if I pull the lever, it's going to unlock the door and open it. And you'll notice as I go back here, there's 3 more ants. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the front of the tunnel, and I'm going to show you exactly how I place these ants so you can kind of get an idea of different ways you can control the spawns. So back here in the main room, I still place down a couple of ants here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, I believe, something like that. So there's like four out here. So if you want to have the enemies coming and going like naturally as they normally would, it's okay to place some of them just like you normally would by placing them. When I say place them, that would mean going to the little bug design icon up here, and then you just pick the bug you want. So I could pick this ant, and I could just place it down here. What I would recommend doing, though, is doing a combination of that if you want them to come out. If you just want them to stay in, you don't want to place any of them like this. You want to do what I'm going to do here in these other scenarios. So over here, what we have is going to be this object block here. So this is a trigger volume. So that's going to be on the gizmo page. It's going to be this one. You can either use this one or the sphere one. It doesn't matter. I typically use the one that's a square because it's just easier to mess with, although the circle will work fine here because it's a tunnel. The way this works is, as I walk through here, you're going to notice, and I did place a couple other ants down here, naturally. As I walk through that trigger, what's going to happen is these 3 ants back here are going to spawn. So they will not spawn until I walk through the trigger. So what will end up happening is this room will always have ants in it. So even though these 2 are most likely going to wander out, these 3 will not even spawn in until I walk through this trigger volume. Now, there is one downside to this, and I guess I'll have to figure out a way to... There's probably a way around this. I just haven't thought of it yet. As if I walk back through it, it's going to spawn 3 more, which it's not that big of a deal because I'm probably going to be leaving the tunnel anyway, but it could cause problems if you have too many bugs inside of there. So that's not the ideal way of doing it. Over here, we're going to have a door, and what I did here was this door. As I open the door is going to trigger these 3 ants to spawn, so they will always be inside of here. And then last but not least, it's going to be over here. It's going to be the trigger. Is going to be the lever. So this door is going to be locked. And what I've done is I've linked the lever here. So the lever goes over here. If we look at this, it's going to say, go to a little icon. It's going to unlock it and open it. And when it does that, the ants are going to spawn in. So if I just move this wall out of the way and go back here, you'll see that there are ants sitting back here in the little corner here, and they will not spawn in until I actually go through that door. So those are the 3 different ways, combinations you can use to set up different spawns. And like I said, this is going to be useful if you're trying to create like a dungeon. I noticed that one of the things that happened to me was there's a lab that's sitting outside, and I placed the Tase Tees and Ruz Tees and Archers inside of it. And as soon as I started up the map, and you'll notice, I'll just start this up just to show you what happens. They should ignore me because I have the ant armor on. You're going to notice these guys are just immediately trying to get out. I noticed this with most of the enemies. I did not test it with all of them, but many of the ones I tested it with, this exact same thing happened where as soon as you hit play, or when someone loads into your map, all the bugs that you place down, all the enemies you place down, are going to just start moving around. They're not just going to stand still. So what happened with the robots was I put them in the lab, and as soon as I hit play, all of them just flooded out into the main room and were trying to get outside the building, which completely defeated the purpose of the lab that I had built because I had them placed in 4 or 5 different rooms, and what I wanted them to do was be in those rooms guarding the things that I had put in there because I put loot in there. So I ended up using some of the combinations that you saw down here. I believe in that scenario, I just used the ones where you walk through once you walk through the trigger volume, it would just spawn them in. So that worked out really well. I'm still learning this game mode, just like I'm sure most of you are. If you have any ways of sharing better ways or different ways that I didn't show of spawning in enemies and having better control over it, let me know in the comments down below. I will say, like, in the open world, I basically just placed them down. I only used these other features when I was basically for the dungeons or the tunnels that I was utilizing because I didn't want people to walk inside of them and have them be completely empty. Because you can imagine, like, this tunnel right here, if I place 15 or 20 ants in it, if you don't go to this tunnel for, I don't know, 10 minutes or something in-game, there's a chance you might go over there and all the ants might be outside of it. Now, they might all be inside of it, more likely than not. Many of them will have wandered out, and many of the rooms inside of there are going to be completely empty, meaning any items you place in there, any kind of things you're trying to have, will just not be challenging because there won't be any enemies. So that was my #1 biggest tip for Grounded Playground mode. There's many, many more to share. If you guys are interested in them, let me know in the comments down below. I'll be more than glad to make some additional videos with maybe functionality of the different gizmos or just other features I used. What I'll probably do is after a week or two, after as many people have wanted to try my original map as possible, I'll probably go down and do a breakdown video of exactly how I set the whole thing up in terms of design and stuff like that. So that might give you guys some ideas for yours. If you guys have any codes you want to share for your maps, leave them in the comments down below, leave them in my Discord, or just share them with me during my live streams. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to hit the like button, consider subscribing. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.